hearing of the Readiness Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee. First, some administrative and technical notes. All of us have heard this many times, but nonetheless, our General Counsel says we must go ahead and do it one more time. Members are reminded that they must be visible on screen within the software platform for the purposes of identity verification. Members must continue to use the software platform's video function while attending the hearing unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render the member unable to fully participate on camera. If you experience technical difficulties, please contact the committee staff for assistance. When you are recognized, video will be broadcast via television and internet feeds. You will be recognized as normal for questions. But if you want to speak at any other time, you must seek recognition verbally. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Remember to unmute prior to speaking. Please be aware there's a slight lag between when you start speaking and when the camera shot switches to you. Please also remember to keep the software platform's video function on for the entirety of the time you're attending the hearing. If you leave for a short period for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, please leave your video function on. If you're leaving to join a different proceeding or will be absent for a significant period of time, you should exit the software platform entirely and then rejoin when you return. Please be advised that I've designated Melanie on my committee staff to be the enforcer. She will mute you if you are not muting yourself. If you attempt to speak when you're not spoken to, maybe she will unmute you. Please use the platform's chat feature only to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistical support issues. Finally, you will see a 5-minute countdown clock on the software platform display. Please pay attention to it. However, I will remind you when your time is up. Next, I will now seek unanimous consent to permit a non-committee member who happens to represent one of the shipyards that we'll be discussing here. I would like to seek your permission for Derek Filmer to participate. Without objection, so ordered. Derek, you'll be last on the gavel list, as you know, and I'll call on you when that time arrives. So with that out of the way, I'd like to make a few opening remarks. Two of the most significant inhibitors of fleet readiness are delayed maintenance and out-of-date shipyard facilities. This is a high-stakes problem, as the Navy's fleet is the foundation of our global power projection. Rigorous and timely maintenance means we can have more ships at sea at any given time. It's also essential to preserving our ships' availability throughout their expected service life. Unlike other platforms, major ship maintenance work is complex, enormously expensive, and takes months to complete, and is relatively infrequent. As the administration contemplates a larger fleet of naval vessels, we must consider whether an already struggling shipyard enterprise has the capacity to sustain them. Unfortunately, the planning and performance of the Navy ship maintenance seems to be stuck in a cycle of delay due to optimistic assumptions in acquisition and extended deployments, deferred maintenance, and also inaccurate projections of both the duration and the cost of ship maintenance. Indeed, since 2012, 2/3 of the Navy ships and submarine maintenance availabilities have been completed late, leading to tens of thousands of lost operational and training days. I look forward to hearing about the Navy's efforts to address these problems. I understand there are several initiatives underway to improve the Navy's maintenance operations. For example, shipyard hiring and modernization plan, a new contracting strategy, and analytical efforts to better forecast maintenance needs, among others. Of these, I am most concerned about the modernization of the 4 public shipyards. The Navy's 20-year, $21 billion ship infrastructure optimizational plan is essential to fixing the public yards, which are all in poor or failing condition, with too few functioning dry docks, and equipment well past its service life. I applaud the Navy's development of this plan, which will overhaul antiquated facilities, recapitalize equipment, and reorganize workflow to reduce wasted time. However, I want to see the details of the plan. I want to know what's going to be done in the next 5 years and in the 10 years, and if it goes to 20 years, the years 10 to 20. Now, Congress directed the development of this plan, and I worry that without our continuing prodding, that it will fail to come to fruition. The Navy's in the unfortunate habit of prioritizing resources for new platforms over the essential, but perhaps less glamorous, investment in facilities to sustain and the military construction necessary in our shipyards. I also worry that the projected 20 years is far too long to modernize this critical infrastructure, and that the current plan leaves no margin for flexibility to accommodate a larger and reconfigured nuclear fleet. Upgrading our shipyards is one of the prerequisites for meeting the needs of tomorrow's Navy. Overhauling the way the Navy performs maintenance is another. To this end, I'm particularly interested in hearing how the Navy is using sensors, algorithms, and other data-driven maintenance strategies to perform smarter, more cost-effective maintenance that will extend the lifespans of existing ships. Finally, fixing fleet maintenance must also involve grappling with the self-inflicted damage caused by years of misaligned priorities. For far too long, the Navy has operated at an untenable pace, sustaining the global presence it maintained 25 years ago with a much smaller fleet today. At the same time, leadership has prioritized building new ships over directing resources and management attention to maintaining the current fleet. A successful strategy must confront both the overall size of the fleet and the guarantee that the fleet can be maintained successfully. With that, I'd like to turn to you, Mr. Wilson, who is covering for our ranking member, Doug Lamborn of Colorado, who is not with us today. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman John Garamendi. I look forward to a productive hearing today. The issues of delays and cost increases when it comes to maintaining our ship and submarine fleet is unfortunately a problem we have faced a long time as a challenge to deterrence to provide for peace through strength. The threats we face are only becoming more complex as we confront a rising China who is building ships at a faster rate than anyone has in recent history and now has the world's largest Navy. It's more important than ever that we get to work on maintaining and repairing our fleet correctly while also expanding it both in size and capability. Former Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Pittenger has advised that the Chinese military buildup is the largest in peacetime in world history. This is one of the many reasons I am concerned that the budget top line released recently by the administration fails to keep pace with inflation and cuts defense spending in terms of real dollars. Along with Chairman Garamendi, I want to see the budget details and assess our progress towards increasing maintenance capacity. Our 4 public shipyards have too few functional dry docks and are equipped with capital equipment well beyond a service life that was originally manufactured by companies that no longer exist. All of this contributed to an aircraft carrier average overage of 113 days and overdue submarine availabilities an average of 225 days. That also means 75% of the maintenance periods for aircraft carriers and submarine were completed late between FY 2015 and FY 2019. Congress directed the Navy to develop the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Plan, SIOP, in 2018 to address many of these issues. I remain very concerned that the plan only accounts for 67 of 68 of the anticipated maintenance availabilities of the current fleet. That does not account for any of the reconfiguration of the current fleet that may occur, or even any unscheduled work, as we recently saw with the Bonham Richard. We must see real investments in these yards in the year's budgets. It's not just a question of allocating the required funding, but also the resources required to support the workload planning that can provide certainty to our partners in the private shipyards. The Navy contracts with 22 certified private dry docks, but are without consistent, predictable workloads and contracts. It's impossible for these yards to make the capital investments needed to support the current and future needs. I'm interested to hear how the persons testifying today are working to bring certainty to the workload planning for the private yards and increased capacity. Finally, when it comes to the workforce, we all know that these men and women are critical to maintaining these warfighting capabilities and are often operating without any room of error. Many times we see skill gaps that are not being adequately addressed. I would like to hear how you are working to increase the availability of artisans with skills, critical skills, whether it's partnering with trade schools or apprenticeships, and how we can be supported. This lack of skilled workers has also contributed to the Navy continuing to use overtime to complete planned workload. GAO's analysis found that the high overtime among certain production shops, such as painting or welding, averaging from 25 to 25% for the fiscal years 2015 through 19, with a peak overtime as high as 45%. Core requirements indicate you should be able to get planned work done without the use of overtime to allow for surge requirements and contingencies. I'm very concerned that we lack the surge capacity in our workforce. I appreciate the continued service and experience of all of you who are here today to provide for our nation, and I look forward to the discussions today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I'd like to welcome and thank our witnesses. Appearing today is Vice Admiral William Galenius, Commander of Naval Sea Systems Command, Rear Admiral Eric Verheeg, Director of the Surface Ship Maintenance and Modernization at NAVSEA, and Rear Admiral Howard Markle, Deputy Commander for Logistics, Maintenance, and Industrial Operations at NAVSEA. Gentlemen, please proceed. I believe Admiral Galenius, you're going to start.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Chairman Garamendi, Congressman Wilson, distinguished lawmakers, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss ship and submarine maintenance, and specifically the sustainment considerations that you raised in your opening statements. I will be providing our collective opening remarks. I'd first like to thank this committee for your very solid and continued support of our Navy. It's a privilege to be with you here this afternoon to discuss fleet readiness. A top priority for the Naval Sea Systems Command is delivering combat power, principally the on-time delivery of ships, submarines, and aircraft carriers out of maintenance. In support of our CNO's navigation plan and his priority on readiness, our ability to deploy combat-ready ships and submarines starts in our public and private sector shipyards and ship repair facilities around the globe. Nearly 70% of our fleet at sea today will still be in service in 2030. Our ability to effectively maintain these ships and submarines is critical to delivering on the Navy our nation needs. As our fleet continues to evolve, so does our thinking and our efforts to sustain these ships and submarines that we operate. How we plan maintenance periods, how we contract for the work that we execute, opportunities to improve execution, and recapitalize our naval shipyards. We continue to learn and pursue world-class performance. We've taken lessons learned and input from our fleet, from our workforce, and especially private industry in order to refine and improve our processes and procedures. Our goal is to deliver every ship and submarine out of maintenance on time, every time. And while I'm confident we're working on the right things and the trends are absolutely moving in the right direction, I will tell you we still have more to do, as you indicated during your initial comments. Across surface ship maintenance, where the work is done in the private sector, our Navy has evolved our contracting strategies to provide a better balance of the Navy's cost and schedule requirements, industry's needs for stable funding and workload, and contract award dates that allow for proper planning and material purchasing of the shipyards executing these availabilities. We've also made great strides in using the data available to us to better plan and execute this maintenance by utilizing the Navy's performance to plan analysis and expanding directed maintenance strategies and improving our availability duration and planning tool, known as the Availability Duration Scorecard 3.0. This allows us to better forecast availability schedules and reduce the number of maintenance delays. As we progress with the next generation destroyer, the light amphibious warship, and other new designs, we are leveraging our collective maintenance and sustainment knowledge into the design process so these ships are built with maintainers in mind. Within the 4 public shipyards, we have grown the size of our organic workforce, delivered on new technologies and processes that, as stated in our written testimony, have made significant headway in reducing the days of maintenance delay. The Shipyard Infrastructure and Optimization Program, SIOP, as it is affectionately called, is absolutely foundational to the Navy's ability to execute planned submarine and aircraft carrier maintenance for the next generation of aircraft carriers and submarines. And as we complete a digital twin model for each of our 4 shipyards and build out each shipyard's area development plan, we will be able to design and build modern shipyards that will maximize work efficiencies and throughput and accommodate the Ford-class carriers and the Virginia payload module submarines, the new Block 5s coming down the line. A newer, though no less important effort is our work to improve cost and schedule performance in our naval shipyards. This plan uses data analytics to identify availability planning and execution performance and shortfalls in areas for improvement in our 4 naval shipyards. As I mentioned to this committee in March, we are also utilizing the Naval Sustainment System shipyards effort to institute significant and systemic and transformational changes across all 4 public shipyards to improve our planning and execution performance. Where SIOP is focused on rebuilding and modifying the shipyard's physical infrastructure, Naval Sustainment System shipyards will fundamentally change the way we operate the shipyards. From a business perspective, focusing on our production workforce, their immediate supervisors, our engineers and logisticians, to ensure that they have what they need when they need them so they can execute their tasks efficiently and not expend unnecessarily time and effort on non-value added work. Leveraging industry best practices, this effort is being executed with a collective sense of urgency to empower our people at the waterfront to either solve issues immediately or push them up the chain of command for resolution. As I mentioned when I started, ship maintenance is continuing to evolve, and we look forward to the opportunities to improve across the enterprise and execute NAVSEA's #1 priority of delivering combat power on time. Thank you again for this opportunity to spend some time with you this afternoon, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Admiral, thank you very much for the testimony and for the written testimony. The detail in the written testimony is extremely helpful to us, as is your oral testimony here. I'm going to pose one overarching question, and that is, you're headed in the right direction on both the public and the private yards and what you are intending to do. A lot of this came from the previous NDAAs. We will, in the next 3 months, 2 months actually, complete the House version of the NDAA. What do you need in that law to not only continue what you're doing, but to advance the time frame in which these tasks will be done? What do you need?
So, sir, what I would tell you, just to start off, you know, on the public sector side, and let me just start with the SIOP effort, you know, the focus on being able to accelerate the planning efforts is probably top of that list. And when we talked a few months ago, I mentioned kind of opportunities to accelerate that plan. We're coming through the end stages of that effort, and we'll be ready to discuss with you here, in the very near future. But our ability to get the planning done up front, which includes the area development plans that talk about, the infrastructure, the foundational environments that we want to build these new buildings in, that's probably a key part there. The other thing that we're going to be doing over the next several months is finishing the digital twin models for each of the 4 shipyards. They'll be done by the end of this year, so that's absolutely key. So that's important. On the private sector side, I think we really do need to continue to execute the plan that Admiral Verhagen and his team has laid in place from a contracting perspective, what they're doing with bundling availabilities, our material procurement plans, and things of that nature to continue to improve on these efforts. So those are kind of the near-term things that we need to do and need to get after, sir.
Here's what I would like to do, and we'll take this up with our committee members, is that I would like to have a specific plan for the next 5 years on each of those, on the government yards, the public yards, as to what you need to carry out that planning. And then I would like to have a report back. Well, we'll call you back within the next 6 months to get a report, but we're going to write into the NDAA certain timeframes in which we expect you to achieve goals that will put in place the PSYOPs for the public yards. So we're going to work together with, our staff will work with you over the next month as we prepare, and it's going to be step by step and a date associated with each step and the money that's necessary to carry out those steps. Does that fit with can you carry that out? Can you do that?
Absolutely, yes, sir. We're ready to provide that. We can have that for you. Yes, sir.
Very good. I'm going to end my questions there. I would hope one of our members takes up the public yards, excuse me, the private yards, and Admiral Verhagen's work on that. Joe, it's your turn. Joe Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for Admiral Galinas, as you indicated, and this is in line with what the chairman just mentioned, the stability of the Navy's maintenance industrial base is an important consideration in the context of great power competition. Commercial providers that support the Navy typically require special skills, facilities, and certifications, which limit the ability of the place work at a new commercial provider on a short notice. How would you assess the industry's ability to handle fluctuations in work and accommodate future modernization efforts?
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure I understand the question. This was private industry's ability to handle future work that we may be. Yes, sir.
With the stability that you mentioned. So.
Yes, sir. Okay. I would tell you right now, I think the shipyards that we have are able to handle the work that we currently have. One of the ongoing discussions, I'll say, that we're having right now is as we, potentially look to possibly grow the fleet, what additional capability or capacity might we need to bring online, okay? And so, when I think through that on the private sector side, and I'll ask Admiral Verhagen to provide his comments on this, but, where can we bring on additional capacity, okay? We've seen examples of that on the West Coast as of late, where we've had, a couple of new shipyards come into play. We've seen that in Pearl Harbor, where we had one ship repair provider, leave the island, and a couple of other companies step up and come into that. There are also a number of smaller shipyards out there that I don't think we're fully utilized. So there is some of that capacity that's out there. The other part of this is some of the smaller companies that really support these larger ship repair yards. So these are the subcontractors that provide very specific services, whether they be mechanical or electrical, or even support services in terms of things like staging and coding applications, things of that nature. So that's a part of industry that we really need to continue to focus on, and we'll continue to look at that. Another element of this would be opportunities for CapEx, and I think that's something we need to continue to look at for some of our private industries. I would tell you on the current contracting strategy and fixed price, frankly, that is probably more difficult for industry to find the CapEx money to provide there. And with that, I'll stop, sir, and ask Admiral Verhaeghe if he has any additional comments, sir.
Congressman Wilson, thank you for that question, sir.
Right.
I do agree we're headed in the right direction. There's more work to do, and both industry and the Navy need to do more. I do think we're heading on the right trajectory, as you said. Two parts kind of would be my answer to this. One is we need to maximize our productivity for each day that a ship is in the yard. So we need to do better with the capacity that we have, and both industry and the government Navy has a part in that. And so things like awarding earlier to allow better planning, speeding our decision making whenever there is growth or new work, providing all the long lead material ahead of times. Those are all things that the government is doing collaboratively with industry. On the industry side, they're focused on schedule management, kind of investing in their trades, and exploring ways to expand capacity. I think the second piece on expanding capacity, I would like to see a CapEx-like approach, things focused on training, things focused on maybe dredging or expanding dry dock capacity. Those things will give us some flexibility and surge capacity, both during kind of normal operations and more in a kind of emergency situation. So a great partnership ongoing right now with Hampton Roads Maritime Consortium. It's the state, the federal, the local, Old Dominion University, all of us working together on how best to position our collective ship repair base for long-term success.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. A couple of things come to mind from that discussion, and thank you for raising that set of issues, Mr. Wilson. Talked about capitalization. There's the small shipyard program in the MARAD over in the T&I committee. We need to look at that specifically. I know that the old program at Mare Island in San Francisco Bay, they have a very large dry dock that is not operable right now, but with a certain amount of capital expenditure that could be, and then they could bid for the repair of naval ships. I know that's not unique. I know that is repeated around the nation. And so as we look at this in a holistic way, we need to also bring MARAD into it so that the privately owned docks, not just the big ones that we know so much about, but some of the others that are out there that can take on some of the smaller jobs could be made available to the Navy, providing more competition and perhaps, hopefully, better readiness. Admiral Verhaeghe, we'd like to work with you on that. Any suggestions you have, we can take that over to Salud Carbajal as the chairman of that subcommittee. We'll work with him. Here is the gavel order for the next three people: Golden, Scott, Luria. So, Mr. Golden, your turn.
Thank you, Chairman Garamendi. I'm going to ask Vice Admiral Galinas a question here. Admiral, the Congress, as you are aware, is having a conversation about investing in critical infrastructure for the entire nation, not just from a DoD perspective and a national security perspective, but across the board, our nation's infrastructure. Looking at the Navy's Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Plan, I know it's 20 years, about a $21 billion effort to recapitalize the public shipyards. Do you have an estimate? Does the Navy has an estimate for what type of investment is necessary for the private yards as well in order to best meet the needs of the Navy's maintenance schedule?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you for that question. We do, and we've been working with a couple of the private yards where we would potentially make some of that investment. There are things such as potential I'll say dredging projects that would help in one port. The addition of maybe a ship lift system to better utilize the capacity within the shipyard. Maybe another project. Okay. I think as Admiral Verhaeghe, talked about, the development of the workforce is always, high on my list anyway, in terms of, ensuring that we have a well-qualified and trained workforce. So those are a couple of, I'll say projects, that we have kind of shovel-ready type efforts, if you will. So there's some of that out there, and we certainly have, we get a lot of input from industry in this as well. And, if that opportunity were to present itself, sir, I feel pretty confident we could provide a pretty good, detailed list, in relatively short order. Over.
Thank you, Admiral. And, I hope the chairman would be interested in looking at some of those numbers as well. I mean, there's no doubt that this is critical infrastructure. Also no doubt, that it would be a big help to the Navy and important to our national security. But, that work needs to be done. If we're able to accelerate it, I'm sure that's also going to be supporting some good jobs in developing, as you said, Admiral, important skills, which we need in general in our shipbuilding workforce. So I think it's something worth looking at in the context of the American Jobs Plan. Chairman Garamendi. I don't know what the actual cost would be, but certainly very important. While we're talking about it, what other ways do you see public-private shipyard partnerships being able to help the Navy speed up the effort to get a reduction in the schedule backlog and maintenance delays going forward?
Yes, sir. So, one of the things we're working right now, an example, we have a couple of submarines, as you know, in one of our private sector shipyards. We're working closely with them to provide some, lessons learned from how we finish 688 submarines and how we certify the submarines for sea. We're working with them on sub-safe qualifications. We've also started a partnership with the yards on welding and NDT processes, okay, which are key to any ship repair or new construction effort, as you well know. And so those are a couple of kind of specific things that we're working with them on. And I'll go back on the back on the workforce, if I could, for just 1 second. And Admiral Verhaeghe mentioned the effort ongoing down in Hampton Roads. But, what we're seeing in the new construction world, every new construction shipyard really does have I'll say a pretty good apprentice program. And we need to kind of leverage some of the work that has been done, in there, up in the Northeast there, or on the Gulf Coast, or, there's good apprenticeship programs out there. We've got good apprenticeship programs in our public shipyards as well, teaming with community colleges, as I mentioned during our last discussion here back in March. But I think, being able to kind of expand that more into the private sector, and not just the private repair yards, but even down to some of those subcontractors that I mentioned to kind of work in that area as well. So I would offer that as another area we could certainly, kind of advance the partnership a little bit. Over.
I see I'm out of time, Chairman. I appreciate that last bit there, Admiral, and I would let you know I'm actually working right now with Bath Iron Works in Maine and our community college system in Maine to get some mobile welding opportunities out there to, apprenticeship style programs, so we can get even more people trained up quickly to hire at that yard, which I know you're familiar with.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Mr. Golden. The program that you're working with in Maine, could you please develop that information, get it to the committee? And we do want to spread that kind of activity around, so that, Maine is good, but there are other places that need to have the wisdom of the far Northeast.
I'd be more than happy to share that.
One of the things that we're going to need to do here as this hearing continues is to circle back. Our committee schedule is full, the formal committees. I am, after just 36 minutes of this hearing, of the opinion that I would need to pull together an informal roundtable with the private, with the admirals, the private shipyard, the government shipyards, and the private shipyards to discuss this, the good and the bad, and what needs to be done. We really need to hear from the private companies as the issues they have with the Navy and what they need. The infrastructure issue that you raised, Mr. Golden, is a fascinating one to include in the infrastructure bill, shipyards. We've certainly talked about dredging, but I don't believe we talked specifically about funding not only the military, but the private shipyards. Very good. Okay, our next witness or next presenter is Austin Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Admirals. I'm landlocked here in South Georgia, but I represent Robins Air Force Base, and one of the key things to us as we talk about the air logistics complexes is that the Air Force has been very public about the fact that they cannot operate with any less than 3 depots, and that obviously gives some comfort to the contractors around the base and industry that builds up around the base that the base is going to continue to be there in the future. Could the Navy survive with less than 4, the 4 shipyards that you currently have?
We could not survive with less than 4, no, sir. I will tell you that. In fact, one of the efforts that we're going through right now is actually to expand the productive capacity of our yards. I mean, as you know, sir, back in the late part of the last century, in the 90s, there we had 8 public shipyards in operation, and we necked down to 4. We absolutely can go no lower, no, sir.
Admiral, that's the point that I was about to make, is that in 96 and 97, we closed 50% of the public shipyards that our nation depended on for our naval operations, which is obviously probably the most important aspect of our national security. And I think it would be worth the Navy considering making a very public statement, as the Air Force has, that the United States Navy has a position that there will be no less than 4 public shipyards. And I would encourage you to consider that, just as the Air Force has made it clear that there will be no less than 3 depots. I think it would certainly help you as time goes on with regard to the people wanting to build around the bases with infrastructure that supports you and other things. So have you talk about on 5 and 6 about best practices and improving planning. As I said, I spend more time with the Air Force than the Navy, but do you meet with your colleagues in the Air Force at the senior level to collaborate about best practices? And if you have been able to share across the different branches those best practices?
Yes, sir. I can't say I have personally met with folks in the Air Force on this. We kind of what we do in the shipyards and in ship repair there are opportunities occasionally to get together with other services, but I can't say that I have specifically talked to them about what we're doing. But let me turn this over to Admiral Markle, and I think he can give you a little bit better answer here, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. Appreciate the question and the opportunity to talk about our partnerships with our sister services. So the Department of Defense as a whole brings us all together across the services, and in particular the depot maintenance communities, to share our lessons learned, our struggles, our challenges, which, as you can imagine, are similar to one another, and talk about how it is that we're navigating those particular areas as we move forward. We do that not only with, the depots are different, but they even at times have different funding. Some may be working capital, some are mission funding, but they all share the same thing in that they see challenges with development of their workforce, the partnerships with the private sector, the maintenance of their facilities, et cetera. And we all learn from one another in those forums of what we're doing to, in fact, work on those individual pieces. Like we've shared our SIOP discussion with other services as well. Over.
Sure. And I know that, there's a lot of difference in a ship and an airplane, but when it comes to the software and some of the other types of onboard systems, if you will, there's a program in Georgia called Project Synergy that's a collaboration between the private sector and the public sector in software development. And that would be one that I would suggest might be worth taking a look at, but I know it's different from a construction standpoint, but some of the software development and other things, I do think there's some opportunities there. One other thing, well, I'm down to 10 seconds, so let me thank you for your time. I mean, if we have another round of questions, I'll ask those questions then, but I yield the 5 seconds, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. We will almost certainly have a second round of questions. We now have Ms. Lurie.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Admiral Galinas, in a March 2021 Congressional Budget Office report, the CBO compares the class maintenance plan expectation of days in the shipyard and days of labor to the scheduled and actual amounts for the extended dry docking selected restricted availability, or EDSRA, of the first 5 Virginia class submarines. And on page 12 of the report shows that the class maintenance plan for the EDSRA should have been 450 days and 203,000 labor days. However, the scheduled days for 4 of these 5 availabilities far exceeds the class plan. And furthermore, the actual days it took to complete these availabilities exceeds the class plan by an average of nearly 70% across the 5 availabilities, which resulted in a loss of 1,552 days of operational time. And over the 9-year period when these availabilities occurred, so the first 5 Virginia-class submarines, the Navy lost 4.25 years of operational availability of those submarines. Then in May of 2019, the Navy changed the Virginia-class maintenance plan to increase the duration of the EDSRA from 450 to 590 days, which was a 31% increase, even though historically at that point, these EDSRAs have been taking about 760 days. Additionally, the Virginia-class submarine, its design was expected to have 22% fewer days of labor on average than the Los Angeles class, yet the data described in the CBO report shows that the actual labor days were 43% higher. I was curious, what organization developed the Virginia class maintenance plan?
Yeah, so ma'am, thanks. That's a great question, and I'll tell you, it's something that we've had a lot of discussion on within our team here, because it's you spoke specifically very eloquently about the Virginia class submarines that we're seeing. Similar trends on the 688s, where we're doing a lot more work.
Yeah, so Admiral, I hate to cut you off, but I have limited time on my question. I just wanted to get through a few separate parts of it.
Yeah, so it's our submarine maintenance and engineering team that does that. They're located up at Portsmouth, New Hampshire Shipyard.
Okay, and so why would you assess that the class maintenance plan was so far off from the actual time and man days it took to do the maintenance when it was actually executed?
at a very high level, what we're seeing is, replacements and system repair work that's required inside of the planned service life of that particular component or system. And then we couple that with some challenges, material challenges in getting parts and whatnot for the submarine. So it's really systems not lasting to their service life and then spare parts.
Okay, so Admiral, when I look at this kind of data, what it says to me is that the Navy hasn't accurately estimated the maintenance requirements. And it's one of the many reasons that I think that the Navy has a credibility problem when you come to us. And you combine that with grossly underestimated cost estimates for new construction and timelines for project completion. I think misplaced faith in new technologies that aren't fully developed, and then an inability to deliver promised capabilities. I wanted to shift to a statement you made about submarines in your remarks. So you said that Portsmouth Naval Shipyard undocked the USS California SSN 781 ahead of schedule and completed its follow-on steaming program milestones 5 days early. Is this the same way of saying the availability finished early, or is this mean something else?
No, ma'am. So to be specific on that, last June we reset for all availabilities that were in execution. We reset the completion dates because of the pandemic. On California specifically, and this is through targeted use of overtime, the use of the reserve, the surge main force that we have, and just really the work by the shipyard, we were able to actually beat the schedule that we set for ourselves last June. So, that early undocking and the early delivery was really to the reprogrammed schedule.
Okay, I understand the impacts of COVID. So with my colleagues, we've been discussing the size of the fleet that we need in the future. And if the assumptions that we use in the analysis and making those decisions, such as the time required in maintenance, are not correct, then the size of the fleet that we determine we need can also not be correct. And as we start to build the new Columbia class and the Constellation class, I hope that the Navy has plans in place to be able to better estimate the maintenance requirements for these new classes.
Yes, ma'am. In fact, that is one of the efforts that we're working on right now. Is there is a new avail duration model for the public sector availabilities that we're doing. We just finished that work last month. I talked last time about the 15-year public sector maintenance plan. That model, that availability duration model, is foundational to that plan. We're just coming through some final testing and validation of that model, but I think that will give us a much better and a more accurate picture of the duration of these availabilities.
Well, thank you, Admiral. I look forward to learning more about that. And I know my time has expired, but I just wanted to highlight that what I see in this data is that maintenance delays are significantly impacting the operational availability of our ships and submarines. And like many have said today, the investments in the public and private shipyards and in that workforce actually increase the effective size of the fleet. So the investment in this infrastructure is needed today and not 20 years from now. So thank you, and I yield back.
Absolutely agree. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Lurie. We are going to do a second round of questions, and you can certainly expand on that point, which is a very, very good one. Mr. Kilmer, welcome. Delighted to have you. And what exactly do you represent in Washington?
I represent the 6th District, which includes Naval Base Kitsap, Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. And thank you, Chairman, for inviting me to sit in. I appreciate it. And Admiral Markle, it's good to see you. We miss you out in Kitsap. As a former member of this committee too, it's always good to be back. Admiral Galinas, let me start by just saying thanks. It was good to see you out at Puget just a couple weeks ago. I am relieved to see the Navy recognizing the need to update and modernize our shipyards through the SIOP. I am concerned, though, that given the 20-year project lifespan of the SIOP, that the $21 billion needed to complete these upgrades may be at one point or another allocated to other priorities. I guess I'm less concerned about SIOP being crowded out by other forecasted priorities, like the Ford-class carriers or Columbia and Virginia-class subs, which I support. I guess I'm more concerned about unforeseen budgetary priorities that could arise over the next 20 years. Specifically, I'm worried about the impacts of things like natural disasters, which we've seen more frequent in severe hurricanes and other catastrophic events like earthquakes. Even within the past few years, we've seen natural disasters impacting the Navy's planned budgetary spending, the funding required to repair damages from the earthquake at China Lake, and the impacts of Hurricane Sally in the Pensacola area are two prime examples. I know those disasters alone have cost the Navy upwards of $1 billion, and that spending is cut into other planned priorities. So my concern is that unforeseen spending, however necessary, could delay the PSYOP. And that has, as we've discussed over the course of the last 15 minutes, that could have disastrous consequences for the Navy's ability to respond to the threats of the present and the future. So, one, I'd love to hear your guarantee that the Navy will continue to prioritize the PSYOP even as future spending needs, expected and unexpected, arise. But what can Congress do to maintain focus on PSYOP, to invest in the much needed upgrades at our public shipyards? If money is not allocated to backfill unforeseen spending, what's the Navy strategy to prevent unexpected missions from drawing funding away and resources away from the PSYOP?
Yeah, Congressman Kilmer, hey, good to see you again, sir, and thanks for your time when we were up in Puget there a couple of weeks ago. You know, the budget always gets a vote. I think the way I would answer your question, I'd go back to the request that Chairman Garamendi, asked initially when we opened this, is kind of that 5-year plan, and for us to kind of lay out, I'll say in a fair amount of detail what our plan is, and we have that, and I'll just tell you, within the last month, 6 weeks or so, we now have the full program office in place, and they've been really kind of getting after the acquisition strategy and the details of the plan that the chairman asked for. But I'll also kind of ask Admiral Markle to provide his comments on this as well, sir.
Hey, Congressman, great to see you again. Absolutely look back fondly on our time together up in the Pac Northwest. I'll kind of answer with the entry into the discussion of greatly appreciate your support then. Continue to appreciate your support now of both the Pac Northwest and broader on the committees that you serve on. It truly is one thing you can do is the continued advocacy and support of us. Always a help when we have our congressionals behind us on what we need in order to be successful, whether that's through legislation or whether that's through advocating for it in the various ways that you engage across the spectrum. So I will tell you that just simplistically, just to build upon the Admiral's comments, not only do we owe you a plan and a discussion of the plan, we owe that to the broader Navy, and then from there, obviously looking for your support as we move out on it.
Let me ask quickly, I know, and even today we've heard some discussion around potentially accelerating the work. Obviously moving things left, reduce the risk of PSYOP getting crowded out. I also know it's a logistical challenge. This is a heck of a game of Jenga because you're trying to modernize the shipyards while they still have to work. If your evaluation determines that aspects of PSYOP can be accelerated, do you expect additional funding will be needed?
So as you look at the potential for acceleration, there's obviously two very large constraints that would constrain that, and those are funding, and those are the ability to accelerate those and integrate them with the ongoing maintenance, ensuring that we could meet our mission. Opportunities certainly could exist as we continue to study PSYOP and perform our analysis on those mega projects. Clearly, we're focused on the docks up front. You can see that in the previous president's budget, and you will likely see further commitment to that. But as we look to the broader optimization piece and those things that support that, those are certainly areas of opportunity for us to accelerate integrating with the overall mission execution. Over.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
That you might have. One of the reasons that I'm driving so hard for a 5-year, what are we going to do next year and the year after that and the next 3 years beyond, is, I'll give you an example. Last week, several $billion was returned to the Department of Defense for military construction programs. To my knowledge, none of that will be available for this particular purpose because none of the programs that we've been talking about, none of the activities we've been talking about here are yet in the military construction MILCON program. They're not programmed. So I'm going to drive very hard, Admiral Galenius, you know this, for detail for the next 5 years so that we can every year know what you need. And then, Mr. Kilmer, we become the problem, not the Navy. And so we can, begin to discipline ourselves. Okay, I want to go to a piece here that we've talked about, and that is that the repair of a ship, when it arrives at the dock, is there satisfactory and sufficient information on what needs to be done on that ship? Some call this analytics, data analytics. I call it big data. But it seems to me that we now have the necessary tools to have a much better understanding of what a ship will need when it gets to the dock, long before it arrives, so that the parts and pieces and spares and drive shafts and other equipment will be there when the ship arrives, rather than, and this takes us to the delays that Ms. Luria talked about. It seems as though most of those delays are caused by, gee, we didn't know we needed this piece until the ship arrived. So, admirals, whichever one of you wants to take it, make me really happy and tell me that you're doing data analytics, that you're getting ahead of it, that you're data mining, and that when that ship arrives, you know 99% of what will be needed when it gets to the dock.
Admiral, yes, sir.
Galenius,
yes, sir. I'll start and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues here. But I would tell you, the answer is yes. We're using data analytics in both the public and the private sector side. And, foundationally, it all starts with the class maintenance plan. And as Congressman Luria pointed out, in some cases, we've got work to do on the class maintenance plan. The second part of this is the assessments that we do and the tests that we do on the ships and the submarines before we get them into the yard to get a better understanding of the condition of the ship. And one of the things that we've done over the last couple of years is we've driven more discipline into that process. There's a clear understanding by the fleet that needs to be done, that they need to allocate the time for the ship or the submarine to be able to do those tests. And so that's an important piece. So with that, I'll turn it over to Admiral Verhagen. He can talk a little bit on the private sector side, and then Admiral Markle.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. Congresswoman Luria came over to our war room and very graciously spent 2 hours with us and got to see, I think, in person, kind of our passion for data and for analytics and using it to drive or to inform our thinking and, more importantly, drive our actions. And we've expanded our partnership on that effort to include with the Office of Naval Research, a number of universities, and of course already had Center for Naval Analyses and Naval Surface Warfare Center Corona, who leads our Navy's analytics across for NAVSEA. One quick vignette, which I think hopefully will give you confidence. So just this week, we have a ship that was getting ready for about a 60-day mission, and she had a problem with one of her gas turbine engines, or gas turbine generator. We were able to take the data off that ship, send it to our in-service engineering agent in Naval Surface Warfare Center, Philadelphia. They analyzed the data and provided that information back to our regional maintenance center and allowed us to target the technicians we needed to put on that ship to make the effective repairs. And so what would have taken quite a long time was we were able to speed that up and compress it because of the use of that, what we call ICAS data and the digital twin that we had at Philadelphia. So that's a combined initiative with NAVSEA-05, our chief engineer, our warfare centers, and C-21 and our RMC. So that's a good example. We got more to do, but that's a good example where we're using data to inform our thinking and get more operational availability out of our platform. So that ship is sailing today for the Mediterranean with repairs completed quicker than they otherwise would have because of data. Over.
Yes, sir. Building upon that and not repeating anything that's been said, just a couple of thoughts. We talked about the performance to plan initiative that we have. That takes the totality of the data that we have, get some data scientists involved, provides us the analytics to both what's been discussed, take a look at how better to project what it is that we need in order to estimate cost and schedule for the availabilities. It provides us the focus areas that we need to work on down to the individual levels. It provides us a better understanding of what components need to be repaired when. And then things like Admiral Verhaeghe talked about, looking at things like vibration analysis that gives us indications of what we need to work on and when. And then just to take a slightly different look at what large data can do for us, doing things such as 3D scanning of and modeling of the hulls themselves provides us an opportunity to help our folks train on realistic conditions of what the specific configurations of the ship are, and provides us a better planning tool such that we can write more accurate paper ahead of the availability to prepare for those upcoming assessments. Over.
Thank you very much. We will be following this data trail very, very closely, and frankly demanding that you not only do what you're doing, but you do more of what you're presently doing. With regard to the gavel order, Wilson, Golden, Scott. So, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Garamendi. And Admirals, I am particularly impressed by your presentations. And I also want you to be aware that I'm a very grateful and proud Navy dad. I have a son who's a orthopedic surgeon in the Navy, and it just is inspiring to me to see the leadership of our Navy, and I look forward to joining with Chairman Garamendi to work with you. And Admiral Verhaeghe, what are you doing to prepare for the maintenance requirements of a growing and modernizing fleet? Does the $21 billion shipyard infrastructure optimization plan account for forecasted maintenance needs for an expanded fleet?
Congressman Wilson, thank you for that question. Two strategies for that. One is, as we talked a little bit earlier, make the maximum use of the capacity that we have today. And there are improvements needed on both the government side and the industry side to get to where we want to be. One of the best things to do is to give industry a stable and predictable demand signal. And when they have that, then they can make wise investment choices to improve their performance. We are awarding our contracts earlier than we used to. As we speak, our average days prior to the start of the avail that we've awarded our contracts this year is 123 days prior, which is, I think, a magnificent improvement. We're also adding a second ship sometimes, which we call a horizontal bundle, and that is to provide certainty to the company that wins that second ship 2 in a row, but also allows others that didn't win that contract some certainty as well to inform their planning. So better demand, level loading our ports, making better use of the capacity we have, and we each have a part. And then we talked earlier about CapEx-like, or the MARAD grant, which I have read up on. You know, those types of things, I think, could be useful as we work to be able to support properly a larger fleet.
Thank you very much for that insight. And Admiral Merkel, a 2019 GAO report found that since 2014, Navy ships spent more than 33,700 more days in maintenance than expected as a result of insufficient shipyard capacity and a shortage of skilled workers. What metrics does the Navy use to measure progress toward growing more shipyard capacity?
Yes, sir. Appreciate the comment and appreciate the opportunity to discuss our our need to balance the workload, the workforce, and the partnering that obviously is necessary there with the private sector. So we often look to Admiral Verhaeg to talk about the private sector, and of course, as I execute my workload, and we look to find the right levers to execute it, clearly there's a partnership to be had in the individual ports with the private sector, whether that's on larger avails, as Admiral Galinas discussed earlier, in contracting them out to the electric boats and Newport News shipbuildings of the world, or it's the discrete contracting that I do for preservation work and other items on the major availabilities, utilizing some of the same private partners that Admiral Verhaeg has. As we look to what Admiral Galinas talked about with our 15-year maintenance plan, it is in fact just that, taking a look at historical data, taking a look at the demand signals of the future, and coming up with an articulation of both what we need to do within the public sector and what we need to develop within the private sector with our partners in order to execute that workload.
And finally, for Admiral Galinas, how has the Navy been performing with respect to the reducing the idle time for submarines?
Yeah, I would tell you, Congressman, we still have work to do in that area, frankly, okay? While we are seeing a downward trend in the days of maintenance delay, we really have not put much of a dent into the idle time, which is, as you well know, is the time from the certification expiration date of a submarine before it enters the maintenance availability. So again, the throughput of the submarines through their maintenance period needs to improve. This gets back in a little bit to Congresswoman Luria's comments about the class maintenance plan and the work that we're doing being so much higher than what's in the class maintenance plan, sir.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I believe it's Mr. Golden. You're next.
Thank you, Chairman Garamendi. I would say quickly, you were asking for details on apprenticeships and training that goes on in the Northeast, and I can speak to Maine, and my staff will be following up with yours and the subcommittees on some details. But as Bath Iron Works specifically in Maine is working to grow their workforce, they are building the destroyers, as you know, sir. They are looking at accelerated training programs to bring in new unskilled workers, get them the skills they need to get a foot inside the yard. The union's really working with the company to look at the continued ongoing training opportunity from there. But there's also a deeper relationship as well with Maine Maritime Academy, where a true, more traditional apprenticeship program as well, which is important, I think, when you're looking at the career opportunity for a young man or woman wanting to get into the shipbuilding trade. But Admiral Galinas, I wanted to ask one thing that we've seen at Bath Iron Works, certainly other private yards, with fluctuations where we see increases and decreases in the shipyard workflow schedule can lead to issues, which I know you're familiar with the term, the bathtub effect, where we end up with an older workforce that is looking to retire, moving on, and then a very young workforce that's as the yard accelerates and is growing, and they're lacking that kind of middle experience group. Can cause a lot of problems, and I think certainly a big concern at a lot of private yards. Are you seeing similar outcomes and effects at public shipyards with their workforce? And if so, do you have any recommendations on how to utilize training and other methods to maintain a skilled workforce at our public shipyards?
Yes, sir. We are seeing that, and I'll ask Admiral Markle to talk about the training strategy that he's put in place in the public shipyards. But we are seeing that, and if you look at the demographics in the public shipyards and go back, I'll say 10 years or so, the average experience of our mechanics in the yards at that point was in the 14 to 15 year point. Okay, if you looked at that same metric today, it's down to about 7 to 8 years. So you kind of see that delta in the experience, okay, of the trade. So we're absolutely seeing that, And I will tell you, from my experience, having worked with both the the public and the private sector side, that's a common trait, as you indicated, sir, across, both public and private yards, and I would say both in repair as well as new construction. And so I'll ask Admiral Markle to kind of talk about what he's doing in training on the public side.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate the question, Congressman. So just like you talked about, it's providing the opportunities for the future artisans to enter the workforce and provide them growth opportunities, whether that's through a high school work-study program where you provide some level of initial understanding and opportunities for the folks to enter the shipyard and understand what the trades are, further developing it into an apprenticeship program, to your point, partnering with the local community college that can ultimately provide them, alongside their trade skills, the college skills necessary to work on both their associate's degree when they graduate from the apprenticeship program, and then leveraging to build upon that later on as they develop into baccalaureate and wherever they may go. To the question on training, of course, the apprenticeship program is wonderful and it's a great opportunity to develop someone into a journeyman, but of course everyone needs work along the way in order to make sure that their golf game stays the way they want it to be. Taking and providing just-in-time training when needed in order to continue the development of those folks to make sure that their experience level is where they need to be and to perform the way we expect them to be out in the waterfront is incredibly important. That same program, of course, is what we utilize to get people faster to the deck plate and reduced our time to train folks by upwards of, on average, of 50%, and takes it from 1 to 2 years to getting people on the deck plate to 1 to 4 months.
Thank you to both of you for that. I think it's helpful background for the committee. Appreciate it very much.
Sure.
Mr. Goldman, I believe your time has expired. Thank you very much. Mr. Scott, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman.
Excuse me, Mr. Scott, before you go, I'm going to go Scott, Lurie. I noticed that Mr. Kalehi was here earlier. I don't know if he's still on. If he is still on, he will come after you, Mr. Scott. Otherwise, it'll be Ms. Lurie. Go ahead, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And most of my questions revolved around the $21 billion over 20 years, and certainly $21 billion is a lot of money, but when it's spread over 20 years and over the course of the magnitude of the shipyards that we have, just the same questions that other members had about, the money ended up going to other places and whether or not it was going to be enough to put us in a position we need to be to service the fleet. So I'll skip that and move to kind of a Russia-China type question, if you will. Are our investments in our shipyards keeping pace with what we're seeing from our peer competitors in China and Russia, or are they doing a better job with their infrastructure for the maintenance of their fleets than we are?
No, sir, I would have to tell you at this point, I think the yards in China are probably more advanced than what we have in the U.S., at least certainly in the public sector side right now.
How far ahead of us are they, and when did they pass us?
Well, they have long had much more shipbuilding capacity than we have, just with the number of shipyards. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. We can certainly provide those. But they've had a large number of shipyards than we have for some time now. I think what you're seeing as of late is kind of an increased focus on, building Navy platform. They're transitioning from commercial shipbuilding into the military shipbuilding, sir.
Sure, and I suppose I could have prefaced that with I was speaking more specifically on the military shipbuilding. When just approximately, I mean, did they catch us on the military side 5 years ago? Was it 10 years ago? When did?
Yeah, I would have to go probably do, I mean, they've really, from my assessment, really kind of in the last 5 to 10 years, they've really turned the corner on their military shipbuilding. I don't know that their processes and their capabilities, quite frankly, are better than ours. In fact, I would say they're not. I think what we do inside our public shipyards, there is no other group of shipyards in the world that maintains nuclear ships like we do, okay?
Yes.
So we have a tremendous capability. What we need to do is get better at how we use that capability. So I'll turn it over to Admiral Marcos.
They don't have any, I do not believe they have anywhere near the quality that we have. I do worry about their ability to pump out quantity, and quantity, something becomes a quality in and of itself when you're in a fight. I do, if I can mention something for you and for the members, Admiral Fowler the other day testified that Communist China's money laundering is the #1 source of illicit funds for the transnational criminal organizations. It was the first time that I'd heard somebody at Admiral Fowler's level call it out publicly like that in a hearing. And then General Townsend a week later called out China for the illegal fishing off of the coast of Africa and the damage that it was doing and the widespread hunger that it had the potential to create inside of that continent, several countries in that continent, and the potential civil unrest. You guys know that the China fight would be a naval fight. I mean, what's your assessment of China's activity in the Taiwan area and the illegal fishing?
Yeah, sir, I really appreciate the question. I'm not sure I'm in a position to give you a real good answer there, but we could certainly take a question and get back with you on that one, sir.
All right. Well, I know that wasn't the subject of the meeting, but it's. I picked up very clearly that some extremely high-ranking military leaders that I very, very long trusted are now speaking publicly about things that we used to say behind closed doors. And I picked up on the G7 coming together to effectively caution China on any action against Taiwan. And I worry about our dependence on not just chips, but other things similar to what we would consider to be a semiconductor or an optical chip, and dependence on companies in other countries to manufacture those that we have to have in all of our computer systems, whether it be an aircraft or a naval vessel. With that, I yield the remainder of my time. Thank you for what y'all do.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. I want to bring to your attention, I think the other committee members probably know it also, we have been working on trying to energize the American shipbuilding industry using the export of natural gas and petroleum products, that be on American-built ships. We do know that the American shipbuilding industry has atrophied and basically given the commercial market to Japan, Korea, and China. And in that, we have lost a great deal of our capacity upon which the Navy would depend, not only for the ongoing repair, but for ships that we would need to get to 350 or even more. So it's an issue that goes beyond just the naval ships. It goes to the commercial ships. Similarly, the Jones Act plays into this, and the ability of the shipyards. My final point, I guess for all of us, and admirals, for your awareness and pushback to us, is that the shipyards are going, the privately owned shipyards are going to need to be upgraded, capital upgrades, particularly the smaller ones that could provide additional services. And I would like to have from you, Admiral Galenius, the estimate of smaller private shipyards that you would intend to contract with for certain kinds of repairs. I want to feed that back into the issue that was raised earlier by one of our colleagues about the infrastructure bill. Okay, Ms. Lurie, it is your turn.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And in the first round, I discussed the class maintenance plan for the Virginia class submarine, but I'd like to shift to surface ships for the second round. Many people use the term legacy platforms to describe anything that they want to get rid of. And I found that it's interesting today that people are using the term legacy platform for ships that are not even 10 years old, like the LCS, the first 4 in the class, and they're also applying it to the Ticonderoga class cruisers, which still have usable service life remaining. I served as the XO on USS Anzio, so I understand it costs more and it's difficult to maintain these ships, but global presence matters, even if the presence isn't the latest shiny object. And divesting of these platforms today, while their replacement is nothing more than a concept in the future, I don't think is prudent. And as we know, both the outgoing and incoming Indo-PACOM commanders testified recently to the Senate that China could make an offensive move on Taiwan in the next 6 years. So it's curious to me why we'd suggest getting rid of these platforms without a replacement. So I think the Navy needs to look at today, Battle Force 2025, before we can truly talk about Battle Force 2045. So just some information that I would like to know, Admiral Galinas, if you could provide the committee the amount of funds over the fit up that it would be required to maintain the 11 cruisers and the first 4 LCS that the Navy is proposing to decommission in the Battle Force 2045.
Okay, yes, ma'am. We'll take that question and we'll get a more detailed answer that I could provide you in this setting. But I understand the question. I think it's a fair one, and we'll get you that information. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to that. And next, sort of pivoting back to the CBO report that I discussed during the first round of questions, it has a really interesting chart in there where it compares workload versus the workforce. So if you look back to when we had 8 nuclear capable shipyards, the workforce exceeded the workload capacity by about 10%. And then we were reduced to 4 nuclear shipyards, and the workforce and workload were balanced for about 5 years. And however, as we decommission conventional carriers, the workload exceeds the workforce in every year. And then the CBO report, it forecasts out that even with the full implementation of the SIOP, that workload will exceed workforce capacity in 25 of the next 30 years. And I think that's not even taking into account the ships that we plan to build, the additional submarines for 2045. It's clear that the public shipyards will not be able to maintain the pace of that maintenance. So Admiral Galinas, in your assessment, with such an ambitious plan as Battle Force 2045 and the number of submarines we plan to build, do you feel like it's time to invest in another nuclear capable shipyard?
Yes, ma'am. I think that's a great question. I would tell you at this point, and it has to go. I'll go back to the 15-year maintenance plan that we're working on right now. I will tell you that submarine maintenance is probably my #1 priority right now, and how we execute that, especially as we get out into the late 20s and into the early 30s. Okay, when we start, we're gonna, as you well know, based on the ship construction plan, we're gonna go through a little bit of a valley here over the next few years, but then it quickly ramps up in the late 20s and into the 30s, and our ability to be able to support that fleet. And to, what we're doing right now with the SIOP effort and the naval sustainment system work to really kind of buy back that productive capacity, and then lay over the 15-year plan to determine, do we have the capacity within the public yards, and then how much would we outsource to the private yards? That would probably better inform that type of a discussion, and I'm happy to have that with you when we get that analysis completed.
Well, thank you. And just, we have a minute remaining. So just wanted to point out that, the one thing I hear the most frequently in my visits across the waterfront here in Hampton Roads, 1/4 of all the shipbuilding and repair in the country happens here. And you've referenced the importance of the region for maintaining the Navy readiness. It's level loading. It's level loading of the port so that there can be predictability, so that our partners in the private shipyards can make the investment in their infrastructure and their workforce. And so I went and visited the Gettysburg and the Vicksburg recently. And, here we are, it's shocking when they've made investments in the work that is coming down the pipeline to modernize the cruisers. Yet all of a sudden a plan comes out now it shows yet more unpredictability that, we might decommission 10 or 11 of these cruisers. And, every time that happens, it's 600, 800, maybe more workers across the waterfront who are laid off. And those are skills that are difficult to replace. So, just making a point of what I'm hearing the most from the waterfront here and our private partners. And I know my time has expired, so I'll yield back.
I would just say, ma'am, I appreciate that comment, and I get the same thing when we interface with industry. And as Admiral Verhaeghe pointed out, that stable and predictable workload I think we owe industry that plan. So I thank you for those comments. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Leary. We're definitely going to have a roundtable with the private shipyard owners and to discuss a range of issues, some of which have already been mentioned here. Certainly the scheduling is an issue, what kind of repairs need to be done, all of those things. Admirals, we'll invite you to that. It'll have to be an informal hearing just because of the scheduling. I believe we now have Mr. Kilmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks again to you and your staff for the generosity of letting me participate. Admiral, I worry a bit, and maybe it's just after this last year, I worry that the sands of the hourglass could run out before we've had a chance to shore up the infrastructure at our shipyards. You know, what we've learned over the past year is that anything can happen, and it's certainly possible that a natural disaster could strike one of the shipyards at any moment and render it or a crucial portion of it unusable. I touch wood every day that a seismic event doesn't happen here in our neck of the woods. So has the PSYOP program office built any contingency plans into the PSYOP in the event that a natural disaster occurs, or would the program office need to kind of go back to the drawing board and completely rework the plan? I realize we can't plan for every possible scenario, but I'm just curious to know what level of preparation has been completed in case a shipyard experiences an unexpected catastrophe.
Yes, sir. No, I appreciate that question. I think that's a fair one. You know, and it's especially pertinent up in the Northwest, as you indicated. You know, I think our near-term opportunities to accelerate, as I mentioned earlier, are on the design and the planning piece, and you know, we've got to get that work done. Then, you know, from there we can advance into the actual construction and execution stage. You know, that work is ongoing. The execution work, the production work is ongoing, as you well know, up in Portsmouth. They're well along. We've got some fairly significant projects going on down in Norfolk right now. We're working through the planning piece out in Pearl to be able to you know, to start in the 23 timeframe, the dry dock in Pearl, the new dry dock out there. And I will tell you, we're going through right now, you know, what happens in dry dock 6 up there in Puget, and how that planning piece plays out. So, you know, of the 3 dry docks that we're actually building new, if you will, in Portsmouth, Pearl, and Puget, you know, that's probably the 3rd in line at this point, based on the current plan that we have. You know, if there's opportunities to accelerate that, because I will tell you, as you well mentioned, you know, there is concern about the dry dock up there and the seismic, you know, safety of it, and you know, because it was designed and built prior to the current seismic requirements that are in place in your part of the country, sir. Over.
I want to touch on one other subject, but quickly, Admiral, I guess I was trying to get at, are there contingency plans in place if there is a disaster, or does the PSYOP program office just have to go back to the drawing board?
Yeah, we have not really planned.
Either Puget or any place else.
Right. No, I mean, I can't say that's part of our plan. We would have to, we would readjust. I liken it to a kind of a ship construction contract when we have a major hurricane, for example. You know, and think about, you know, Katrina hit the Gulf Coast several years ago, and I was involved in that with our